Hey, Aaren Currie, NextHome Statewide out in Howell, Michigan. So we are officially considered Next Homies.
That's right.
Although that's not exactly why I asked you on. I just wanted to chat.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about Aaren, how you got into real estate, why you got into real estate, and then we kind of go from there, man. Welcome, by the way.
Sounds great. Hey, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So my parents were in real estate before me. I got my license at 18. So I was one of the youngest people licensed in Livingston County when I got my license. And when I was 18, I looked like I was 12. So it was super hard. The first year I made like 1,200 bucks. Second year I made 12,000. Then year three I made 24,000. But in doing that, I was able to get the 18 transactions. I took additional schooling, appraisal classes, and then I earned my broker's license at 21. In 1996, we opened a brokerage together, my parents and I. And you'd have to know my parents. A lot of people would look at me and be like, "Oh, well, your mom and dad just, gave you a listing or gave you a sale."
Sure.
And my parents, under no circumstances, would do that, right? They were the type of people who said, "Hey, this is great. You're coming into real estate. We'd love to have you here. But understand that all your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, any of your friends or your friends' parents that we may have talked to about real estate in the past, they're still our customers. So good luck."
Yeah. So, for anybody that's not in real estate, obviously we call it our sphere of influence. And your sphere, while you had your own friends and maybe some cousins that were closer to you, your sphere were your parents' sphere when starting. That's kind of what you're saying here. So, yeah, good luck.
It was that big. Yep.
And on top of that, so if I interview two agents, one's you and one's your dad, and Pops has all this experience, and
Yep.
you're this 21-year-old punk, who maybe isn't a punk, right? But that's just
Yeah, I was. Oh,
okay, even worse. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, that's funny.
A 5-liter Mustang with, straight pipes on the back and a dip in my mouth. And here I am, the big realtor.
I always had I had a couple of Explorers and some other vehicles, so I always had like subwoofers in my truck. So I
Yep.
couldn't imagine being that young. Even if I turned the radio down, you would have heard that boom boom. When I pulled up, that would have been hilarious. So
Yep. That's the way I was too.
so
So
21
it
had your
was
license. Your parents
yep.
basically said best of luck to you, but
Yep.
you're older than 21, so get us to here.
So in 1996 we opened our own brokerage, and we did it like 800 square feet. It was nothing fancy, and still selling. And my dad, he never wanted to. He had been in business before. He never wanted to own a real estate brokerage. Right? It's kind of like herding monkeys. We're independent contractors, and everybody. It takes a special kind of person to do that. You have to be independent, and you have to be kind of pat yourself on the back some days because everybody else is kicking you. And he just didn't want to manage that type of a group. He was good at selling, and he enjoyed selling, and he was in the top probably 3% of the county at that time. So between his production and my production, we really were a company. So we had been with like Better Homes and Gardens and Remax and that kind of stuff, and we opened our own company, and we
Did you
grew
guys
it
have
to
other agents working for you in '96, or did you guys just start you and dad and stuff like that?
just me and Dad. And then I went on the hunt and started to recruit some people, and we grew it to about 18 people, mostly new people. And we had to train them on how to be productive, and we did. I mean, they were, again, in the top 10% of realtors,
Mhm.
going from zero production, brand new, to really learning. And we did that by having them shadow us. So it was, they could learn from how we did real estate. And if they just followed the simple process, we gave them the words, and then they created their own, script, so to speak, and they became very productive.
Sure. So in the in the mid to late '90s, what was a productive agent? Because
Mhm.
today maybe the
Yep.
numbers are different, right?
Right. So at that time, you wanted to be $1 million producer. That was a big deal. An average sales price might have been $100,000, and so if you did 10 a year, you were $1 million producer. To be a rock star, you were in like a $5 million production range. You were doing 5 times what the average agent.
And for those that don't know, today 5 million uh, is still pretty good production. However, it's not going to be your top 1 or 2 or 3%. But there's a lot of agents in this industry for one reason or another that only do a handful of transactions. And I mean, unless those handful are all $1 million listings, you're not going to be at 5 million. So it's still a very respectable number. But it certainly wouldn't put you in that top few percent. And some of that just being obviously pricing is different, right? I mean, like where I live in South Lyon, the median sales price is like 358 or something like that. So if you're just selling average priced homes, you're going to be, at 350 to $400,000.
That's right. Sell four, and you're $1 million producer. You got
Yeah,
something to talk about.
exactly. So it's an interesting look at it. And so now we can, I mean, you can tell me as much of the story as you want, but I guess if we fast forward to say, 2000, 18, 19, 20, now you are still a broker. And,
Yeah.
what kind of I'm curious as an agent, what's inspired you to stay and remain a broker? Because I can tell you, I love Dwayne, my broker. I love Pete, my last broker. So it's not the broker or the brokerage. And I like helping people and training and stuff like that. The responsibility that lies in your hands for your
Yeah.
agents, even a simple mistake, let alone somebody who is intentionally, going out of the way to do things shady, um, is scary enough to me that I may one day get my license, but I have no intentions of actually being a broker.
Yeah. So let me break that down and unpack it a little bit and back up just a hair, because in 2008, I don't know if everybody heard, but there was a market crash.
Really?
Yeah. So, that's all I knew how to do was to sell real estate. And I guess my second option would be like be a greeter at Walmart or something. And the market crashed, and everybody around was like, "Oh my gosh, it's a scorching earth. The world's on fire." And so, tons of people split out of real estate, and there was very few that were very productive. Values, your average sales price at that time, but just before that time, might have been 225, and all of a sudden, here comes everything foreclosing, and the new average value is like 60 grand. So when you were doing, $5, $6 million in real estate, you needed to do 4 times the amount of sales to continue along that pace. And it just happened that I was fortunate enough. I guess going back to unpacking that, why am I still here? Why would I be a broker? It's because my competitiveness and there's just something in me that won't, if somebody says you can't do it, I say, yes, I can, and watch me. And so I dug in, and I noticed all the people around me that had any production at that time were selling foreclosures. And so I kept digging for maybe 6 months, and I got a break and got in with HSBC, and then that blossomed into like 12 different banks. And all of a sudden, my production went to like 9, 10, $11 million a year for like 2 or 3 years. So you went from absolutely starving, no sales whatsoever, to being king. And then it all started to feather out, which brings us to, why am I still here doing it? And I had a couple of times thought about, well, I need to get out of real estate. I need to just get a job. You go to work on Monday, you get off on Friday, you get a paycheck. When you clock out, all the responsibility's gone. And so again, I go back and talk to my dad, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm just job at certain." He's like, "You'll never do it."
Yeah.
What do you mean? Of course I'll do it. I'm qualified. I have the ability. I can show that I'm successful. He says, you're not an employee material. The first time they tell you what you have to do and when you have to do it, because you lived like you lived for so long, you'll walk right out the door.
Yeah.
It's just,
Well,
oh man,
that's interesting,
you're
and
right.
probably good from your dad, because most likely true. I mean, um, the misconception and the truth is that we set our own schedule in this business. The misconception is that it means we get to just lounge around or go on vacation or whatever, and that's not accurate. But the truth is that we are fortunate that if we choose that we want to do certain things, we can set those schedules and we can practice or revolve our lives around our practice and not our practice around our lives. Or maybe I had that backwards, but you know what I mean? Like, so if my
Yep,
kid plays baseball on Saturdays at 2, I just put that in my calendar and it is an appointment.
yep,
In fact, it's the most important one of the week, right? But
absolutely. Yep,
that means I might have to work Sunday. Whereas if you would have taken that 9 to 5, 40-hour job, you might not have. So there's a definite misconception in our setting of our schedule, but he's probably right, because I had the same dilemma myself when I got into real estate, thinking about going back to working for somebody, because I had been a business owner going into this, and so I thought, can I handle, even if I became the best of the company, still having
right.
somebody to answer to, let alone if I just had my way and everyone let me do whatever I wanted to do, but I'd still have somebody to answer to. I wasn't sure. So I think your dad definitely hit the nail on the head.
And you're capped, right? Your income's capped.
Right,
You could be the best employee ever and be the highest paid employee there. It
right.
doesn't mean that you can add 25% to your income because you've put your head to the grindstone. This is your wages. That's what you earn. So yeah, that's all true.
Yeah. But I find you interesting as a broker. I'm not saying that this isn't the case for a lot, but there's a lot of brokers that are not active agents still. And you
Most
definitely are, right?
most are not active agents still.
Well, even
And
my own broker is a great guy, I have a great relationship. He's a developer,
yep,
and he has a few listings here and there, but for the most part, especially if it's like a buyer, a friend that's a buyer, he's probably going to refer them to somebody like myself or somebody in the company that can handle them and take care of them, because he's got other things going on, and he wasn't really ever in real estate to actively being out showing homes and getting listing appointments and things like that. But you're in it. I mean, like, how do you even maintain that type of schedule? It's crazy.
it's you have to be willing to work. You go 110%. You need to have that drive. Um, I don't want to be the baseball coach.
Hmm.
I want to be on the team. I want to come up in the batting order. I want to, be second base or shortstop or play the outfield from different times. And unfortunately, I think lots of times people that can't do it, and forgive me for this, but those who can't do it teach, and those who can do it do it.
Sure.
So I would much rather blend those two things together. Um, Speak from knowledge, from practical experience, doing it day in and day out, than to just sit back and be like, oh, back in 2008 when I was selling houses.
Yep.
No, man, I was out showing a house last night at 7 o'clock. Let me tell
Yeah.
you what happened.
And I was going to say, I'll help. I'll help you so you're not buried in a hole here. Um, nothing against many of the members of our associations that teach our classes.
Right, true.
Very knowledgeable, but to your point, they're now in the field of teaching about real estate, versus some of them, but many of them are not in real estate. And
Yep,
then, and again, even from a broker standpoint, there should be a lot of training involved as a broker for your agents, even if they've been in the business as long as you have. There's a learning experience for everybody. We don't all know everything, and whether it's sitting down with papers and pens and whiteboards and training, or it's just sharing experiences as training. There's training to be had, and yeah, there's a lot of people that do a lot of training and yet they are not selling real estate, and that's okay. But you're doing both, so it's definitely a tough job.
yep. I did 32 transactions last year, about $16 million in real estate transactions.
And
That and ran the brokerage, and took off and went on vacation and all that other stuff.
yeah, well, I'll tell you, I mean, for myself, a happy medium is definitely important. I had a great year last year, and hope to have an even better year this year. But with that being said, I'm going on vacation March 10th through March 14th, and I might take a different one around one of the breaks that the kids get. And I have no intentions of having to skip those just because I have, a business to run. At the
Yep.
same time, that means I'll be working crazy, before and after to manage those things. But there's a lot that goes into managing your schedule and things like that. And obviously, maybe you, since you never even had the practice of not having this type of schedule, because you basically jumped right into it at 18, maybe that was beneficial for you. What do you tell like your agents, that they are not used to it? I mean, let's face it, a lot of people don't grow up and say, I want to become a realtor. It
Right.
normally happens somehow. We almost say by accident, we fall into
Right.
it, right? So someone comes from a 9 to 5 job. We get a lot of people from teaching, especially now.
Yep.
Their teacher comes in, they're used to a schedule, they're used to these certain types of hours and certain types of expectations. How do you teach somebody like that just about scheduling?
So it's based on experience. And I had just sat down for an hour this morning with a brand new agent, and we were covering that. We had come through some of the next home training, so we were past, um, learning the webinars that Next Home provides. And now it's okay. How do I get this scheduled? How do I get it running? And the two things based on experience that I had a major fear of as I started is if I start all this prospecting and I get too many customers, right? How am I going to schedule that? And then I'm going to turn people away and then I'm going to ruin my business.
Hmm.
Well, I can tell you in 30 years, it just never happens. And I explained to him, I said, if you had 5 customers, you can manage your schedule based on the times that they're available. You almost never get double booked. And even if it was something that was an overflow, you could throw it to Rachel or Sarah or Lori or Steve or Jason and say, hey, why don't you take this customer? I'm overbooked. Pay me half of it. And
Yep.
you're still getting paid. So
Right.
I was putting walls up before I ever got started. And that was a major mistake. But then, secondly, with technology, and you had to learn it when we came into working with banks in 2008. There's so much technology and pre technology that's available that makes it so simple, you can't miss. If I put it on my calendar on my cell phone, and I've got a 9 o'clock meeting and a 10:30 meeting and a 1 o'clock webinar and a 2 o'clock meeting with an agent and 6 o'clock showing, it sends me an alert 15 minutes before it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally impossible to move something up and let somebody down, and that's really what it comes down to in my heart is I don't want to let anybody down.
Yep.
So when I'm going at my business, it's to do a good job. If I do a good job, the paycheck's there. I don't even worry about that.
Yep.
It's to do a good job. So it's just staying organized. When you have an appointment, no, immediately put it in your calendar. You can't miss.
Yeah, no, I do the same thing. It just goes in right away, even if I don't have all the details for some reason. At least I can still put in Aaren Currie showing Howell, and then I
Yep.
can get the address because maybe I'm driving or something like that. I can get the address later and plug that in. But I live 20 minutes from Howell, so I know to plan ahead, and stuff like that. And so yeah, it's really easy. And let's face it, Franklin Covey still sells planners. Shinola sells planners. So does Staples. They're $10. So you don't even have to have, the $300 one from Shinola, right? So if you're
Yes.
not a tech guy or girl, then you can do it on pen and paper. It's all about making sure you manage. So, Aaron, one of the things that I was really intrigued by, because you said, 30 plus transactions yourself, you're managing a brokerage. I know your brokerage did like over 100 million in sales last year, right?
Um, not last year. I've done over $100 million in sales myself.
Sure.
Aaron in the office here has done over $100 million in sales. I didn't even look at our totals last year, to
Okay.
be honest with you,
Uh,
so I can't answer that question.
that's fine.
But I'll bet you it's around $30, $40 million in sales.
Okay. So it doesn't matter if it was 2 million, to be honest. I mean, I guess my part of where I was going with that is, you know, where you're at is a little bit more, I'm going to say this word wrong, rural.
Yes,
Are you?
no, that's right. Yep.
Uh, and there's more land, sometimes more house, but there's, I guess first of all, because I grew up in Detroit, and so when my wife and I bought our first house in Superior Township, it was right down the street from a little horse farm. They had 3 horses, and we literally closed and drove to our new house. And I said, I think we have to move. I'm like, I can't live like down the street from horses. It was crazy to me, and it almost bothered me for a while. And I lived in a subdivision, so it was like I lived down from horses. Um, and but I mean, you're selling property because of horses. Not all of them, but some of them, right?
Right.
So, like, describe kind of like your client base, and then just what's the market look like? Because all I hear about is, and all I know about is like multiple offers, and you got to go see it quickly, and it's going to sell for over asking. Is that the case in your market?
So there's 190,000 people that live in Livingston County. As of this morning, there was 164 residential listings from $0 infinite dollars.
Yep.
I don't know what that percentage is, but that is tiny.
Yep.
Because we're rural, we're considered a bedroom community, meaning that everybody pretty much that lives within Livingston County sleeps here, but they work in Lansing, or they work in Detroit, or they work in Flint, or they work in Ann Arbor. So that's the key to the bedroom community. We have 3 expressways that come together: I-96, US 23, and M59, and they come together in a triangle, and it'll put you in any one of those major metropolitan areas within 35 to 45 minutes, let's call it.
Sure.
So, where we were very rural, the standard amount of property, the most houses, if you weren't in the town, was 5 to 10 acres. Now it's starting to have growth. And they're becoming smaller parcels. And the townships are catching up with planning, and you've seen 2 acre parcels and then subdivisions that go down to a density of just a quarter acre. But in the outlying areas, it's still pretty rural.
Do a lot of people complain, especially say in that Howell, Marion Township, like kind of that little area there? Are they all complaining about the development? Because I mean, I'm in South Lyon, and that's the number one complaint, right? We used to be a horse town, and now all these people want to move in, and we're going to ruin the town. And
Yeah. It's I hear more complaints about population and how busy it gets than the density of how close the houses are.
okay,
And I tell them, we moved out here in 1971. So I tell them, well, if my dad would have closed the gate on 96, back then we wouldn't even be talking now. You wouldn't be moving out here.
yeah,
So, but you can still be in, 10 acres is a lot of property. You can still be on quite a bit of property in our area for mid 300s to 500,000, which, sounds like a lot of money, but at today's rates is still very
sure.
affordable.
Well, and I've talked to guys in the Boston area and California, and they're if they watch this, they're going to fall over and maybe even move to Michigan, thinking they have investment opportunity. They,
Right. Yeah, they're giving stuff away.
yeah, and, and a neighbor, a few neighbors, they moved here from Chicago, and so they had places where they moved from. It was 500,000 to get in, and so it's all perspective. I'm not saying that they were all just easily buying houses here, but they felt like, wow, finally something that's more affordable. So and obviously, we all work with various clients. I've closed at $60,000 sales and 525,000, and so everyone's got a different need and everything like that. But so you can get some acreage and your bedroom community. Is it a hot market? is it crazy? I mean, I'll tell you, the houses I've gone to in Howell and I've put offers in have been, but
Yes.
I'm normally still helping people with subdivisions. I'm normally, very rarely is my client looking for land and pole barns and things like that.
Right. So yeah, it's super hot. If you ask me to show you all the houses on 10 acres in the Howell schools right now, we may be done after one showing. There's
Sure.
just nothing available on the market. And it's, I think that we were going to head the conversation in this direction, but it's, it's where it's going, where the economy's at, and
Hmm.
several factors in play right now. So, if I can lead us there,
Yeah.
last year with COVID, everything shut down. It killed supply chains. So a lot of your lumber or uh, raw resource materials wasn't moving through the supply chain so that you could get furnaces, so that you could get wiring, so that you could get lights, so that you could get bathroom fixtures, so that you could get lumber to build. And based on supply and demand, when the demand goes up and the supply goes low, the prices started to inflate. Well, of course, contractors, same thing. They were off for a period of time. They were backed up with jobs. And so then they started to pick and choose which ones are going to pay the most. And all of a sudden, the labor rates go up on these things.
Hmm.
So those things combined, along with builders looking at coming into an election year, increased material costs, increased labor costs, said, hey, put it on pause. We're shutting her down. We're not doing new housing starts. Without new housing starts, your existing residential market isn't trending to move. And so then all of it starts to compile all at once and brings it down to that 164 houses or 169 houses in a county of a population of 200,000 people.
Yep.
So even though interest rates are at 2.25%, you might say, man, I bought my house in 2010. I've got $100,000 in equity or $150,000 in equity. I'm going to make that leap to that $450,000 house. You still can't, because that $450,000 house is now a $550,000 house, because again, supply and demand has pushed values super high. So we're in a period of adjustment where I see the supply chains starting to open back up and materials coming through. We're through an election. Rates are still low. I think that as housing starts back, the new construction starts back, this thing will start to break loose and we'll have some existing residential housing hitting the market. And things should start to normalize probably in 2022. Although the caveat to that, of course, is we've been in a period of stagnation probably for 10 years. You haven't seen interest rates, at least I haven't in my career in real estate, stay this low for that period of time. And stagnation, regardless of whether it's, around 12% for 10 years, or around 2% for 10 years, is still stagnation.
Right.
So as we come through this transition with a new administration and new ideas and new policies and procedures, I can see wanting to get the wheel moving, which will be changing interest rates. As that blends with the new housing that's available, I'm not sure where that takes us.
Well, it's funny. A couple of points there. You know, first of all, we can only use history to understand what's happened to try and predict what's going to happen. And yet, we've probably had some fairly unprecedented times in the last really 20 years, right? I mean, we had our first terrorist attack on human soil, on American soil since the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Right.
That leads us eventually into a terrible downturn, along with all the things that came with it, right? As far as bad interest loans and also, but we have now the second worst recession since the Great Depression.
Right.
And so we use that as our, how do we come out of this? How do we recover from this? And arguably those things line up. But all of a sudden, we're even in a place now where, let's face it, our most valuable companies, technically, they don't really do anything. Facebook is one of our most valuable companies. And as much as I love it, and I'm not here to complain about the politics or anything like that on Facebook, it really doesn't do anything. Um, it survives because it sells advertising, but if it went away tomorrow, our lives really wouldn't change other than we don't have a social media platform, right? Because we'd find a different way to advertise. Google provides a search engine and things like that, but they're not really doing something. So while there's thousands and thousands of employees at these companies, and I don't want any of them to lose their jobs, I'm just saying, all these companies are really just facilitators for stuff versus, say, coming out of the Great Depression when manufacturing and people were doing something. So I think as we try to predict what it's going to continue to look like, it's really hard because will we continue to be able to create jobs as an Instagram influencer? Is that going to be a job category for my kids? Or does that go away in just the next 18 months because it seems like ridiculous? I don't know, right?
That's a great point.
Yeah, a YouTuber, I mean, my kids are showing me these YouTubers and I'm seeing legit Forbes reports on their incomes and they're 6 and 7 figures a month. So is that going to be a job or not? Gamer, so I could go on and on about that. So we have that. But then on top of it, to your point, interest rates have gone down. So I bought my first house in '04 and it was 6.75 or 6.875% interest. We refinanced to 6.25 where we sat for a long time. Well, I've recently refinanced to 2.875. And I rolled in a home equity loan, so technically it was considered a cash out refi. And anyone who's familiar with those terms knows cash out refi means higher interest. So that means my interest rate's actually higher than it probably could have been. And what's going to happen when interest rates go to, I don't know, 3.5%, 3.75? Will everybody be pulling the reins back saying, "Ooh, I can't afford this. These interest rates are crazy"? Or do we all understand 3.5, 3.8, 3 3/8, 4? These numbers are so low. Let's keep going until we get back to the mid 6s or 7s. Because in my opinion, that's where we really need to be, right? For things to survive, for banks to want to continue to lend and get into this business and stay in this business, why would you do it at 2.5%? I ask everybody, would you loan me $300,000 so over the course of the next 30 years you could potentially make 68 grand? That's crazy.
In the 90s, the average was around 9.5%. And, there had been periods when it had been as high as 14%. But I'll ask you a pointed question. At what point have you seen real estate not sell regardless of the interest rates?
It'll always sell, right?
Exactly. Yep.
In fact, one of the biggest things that really did lead to our economic collapse with housing was that it seemed like inventory was low because really nice houses still sold quickly, but our average was actually a 13-month supply, throughout the country. And of course, we're in Michigan. We have 10 million people that live here, right? It's really not that big when you think about LA/California, you think about New York, even Chicago, Miami, now Minneapolis. So we're not a huge market. So we have to look at what happens throughout the country and understand that if there's 13 months of supply, for anyone that doesn't know, that means that if we stop selling every house today, it would take us 13 months to sell what's currently on the market. So that's a huge amount versus today we're anywhere from 2 weeks to about 3 months, depending on where you're living. And so that was a big thing. But if we, even in that time, and even as people were losing jobs, interest rates were going up, you could no longer get interest only loans, real estate still sold. You were still selling in 2007, 8, 9, 10, right? So it's still going to happen, but it's definitely going to happen differently. And it's definitely going to be a different group of people that are out there to buy. I'll be interested to see what happens. I can't foresee interest rates changing much throughout the year. Not to the point where it's a drastic change. People should not suddenly become qualified because rates go above 3%, assuming they even can go above 3%. So it's an interesting time, but it's going back to what I was trying to say, it's hard to use the past to predict the future because I feel like the last 10 to 20 years have been same but different. There's a certain story that's the same as far as an economic problem or whatever, but a lot of different results that have come from them. Hard to say that this is how it's going to go because of this or that. But presumably, to your point, 2022 before we even see a change in this type of market with low inventory, low rates, lots of buyers, not enough new construction, and all those fun things that we're all dealing with.
And then you got to add in wages, right? Because you've had so many people off on unemployment, and where do wages go? And then the whole with regard to these corporations who have determined you don't need 100,000 square feet of office space. My people were more productive sitting at home on a Zoom in their pajamas. And I don't have any fleet costs. I have no gas costs. I have no electric, no heat, no rent. Business is going to change. So there's even more dynamics than just what we're talking about that all fall into place so that it gets sorted out. And so do those savings and costs equate to higher wages, or have they determined that they can run leaner, they need less people? So back to your point of what is the next industry that really kicks butt and people are, being employed by the masses.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that we tend to see the most with leadership changes, throughout our country is honestly, jobs, right? I mean, like them or hate them, Trump was trying to have more jobs in America. I don't know that actually happened. I know I see certain reports and I see certain things. It's really hard to know, but I know that was, an agenda. I know some people did bring certain jobs back, but if you bring 200 jobs back to the country, but you send 1,000 new jobs away from the country, did you really do a good thing for America? And personally, that's what I saw happening, whether it was Apple, it was GM, or it was whoever. They did bring certain jobs back into the country, especially after their tax break. But then when they opened a new plant, it was still in Mexico or India or China or so,
Those forces are so far above me. I try not even to think about that to sort it out.
I'm with you. I used to get really crazy and involved and stuff. I won't argue about it anymore. And I don't even really watch much news other than CNBC. CNBC helps me understand what I'm doing in my business and my personal finances. MSNBC and Fox and CNN and everybody else doesn't. Of course, it's important to know big things that are occurring, but to sit here and spend hours a day reading and watching all these news things doesn't do me any good, man.
I'm too busy selling houses.
Yeah. If I'm not too busy selling houses, then I'm going to get back involved in video games or something. I mean, right. All of it's better than what's going on in the media. Yep. So do you think that more builders will kind of come to Livingston County knowing that there is a demand? I mean, even people that are in Oakland County or what have you, especially as suddenly there's already a lot of people that will live in, say, Howell or Fowlerville and drive all the way to Detroit. Now they might not need to drive. Is there an influx coming? Is it like more urban sprawl or urban spread or whatever the right term is?
Yeah, and there was a new verbiage for that. It goes along urban. It's like rural urban or something. But that's beside the point. You can Google all that. We have, since the 90s, we've always been one of the fastest growing counties in Michigan. And we were just recently named richest county in Michigan. So the growth will continue to come, but the planners on different townships are trying to manage that growth and keep it relatively rural. If they're going to have high density, they're trying to plan it closest to the expressways. And then as you go out from that, it opens up. So you might go from a quarter acre zoning close to towns. And then as you move out 4 miles, you might have 2 acre zoning. And as you move out 10 miles, you've got, 5 to 10 acres.
Yeah.
So they're really trying to plan it. Although a lot of the infrastructure was done just prior to that 2008 market crash, where they did major expansions on water and sewer and those types of things, so that it's available. It is, there are parcels. But then again, supply and demand goes back to land values. Right now, an average 10-acre parcel in Livingston County is like 125 to maybe 175. Well, if that's 25% of your home cost, that's a pretty expensive house that you're going to build. And you're going to shoot those numbers right out of the water based on material costs and labor costs right now. So again, it's the wheel's kind of stuck. I don't know where it goes from there.
Yeah, I know. I find a lot of people that they think they want to move that way because they think that they can just kind of have like 1950s, 40 acres and a farm, and then they find. I mean, I've literally found acreage that has like no fencing allowed, or things like this, right? No pole barns, and then it's like everything that they thought is why they wanted to move there. And it's funny. So then they just go and buy another, track house or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or they come to Howell and buy a track house.
Yeah.
Look at it. We live in the country. You do? You got a quarter acre. I mean, I can borrow sugar from your neighbor out the bathroom window.
Well, my initial experience was a friend, his cousin and aunt and uncle lived kind of off a M59 and some other roads, and it was all dirt, and we'd go to town, and things like that. And then that kind of has changed. I remember when they built those outlet malls, and there was a store called Big Dogs, and that was basically the staple of the outlet. And now there's Nike and Coach and Polo and all those guys in there. So that's changed. It's paved. We've obviously seen some restaurants show up. The downtown Howell area is kind of a cool little area, and now again, I mean, now I hear people say, well, I want to go to Fowlerville, or, and so it's like, well, Howell's gotten too big, so I want to go to the next town. This isn't Livingston County, but Fenton, the same thing. It's like, well, Fenton, is drawing you in because they have their little downtown area and their land. But if you come and I come and your friend comes, then the land goes away. So
Mayberry's gone.
I don't know how people don't understand this, but everyone keeps going into the same trap. It's interesting, and I'm interested to see kind of where it goes. I have some thoughts. We've shared some of them, but I think for the most part, at least this year, whatever you've been experiencing, whatever you've been hearing, is probably true. And of course, talk to professionals to know what really is true, because there's, some, some fallacies that are out there.
Absolutely.
But, Aaren, unless you've got something else that you need to, get off your chest. Thanks. I appreciate your insight into how you got into the business, your brokerage. We are both, NextHome, guys, and, that's a growing brand itself, and I know you're breaking ground and building a new building out there. So is that going to be completed this year?
That's my hope. I'm just still getting through the permitting process, but I'm expecting maybe in the next 30 days I should be able to get my pad all set and be prepared with the retention pond, water, sewer, cable, natural gas, all those types of things to start construction maybe March or April now. It's a huge undertaking. So I guess I was a little naive going into it, but we'll get it done. This is who I am. This is what we do. So definitely we'll get it done.
Well, I look forward to seeing it. And if we haven't done another one of these before then we'll definitely do one from the new office once it's up and ready, because I'm sure it's going to be awesome. And I wish that project, as well as your business, obviously nothing but success.
Awesome.
And again, thanks for joining. We'll chat soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Joe.
All right. See ya.
Take care.